The accident happened on a stormy summer night, thunder crashing outside, at a factory on the outskirts of town. Workers were still pulling overtime, rushing to finish an urgent order. Near 11 o'clock, only 2 remained, tasked with drying the last batch of mechanical parts. The dryer stood there, a heavy, cylindrical metal machine, half the height of a man. All the workers had to do was load the parts inside. The chambers spun them dry like the drum of a washing machine, then raised the heat to burn away the lingering moisture. The batch had just finished. Trong stood beside the dryer, reaching for the round hatch to pull the parts out. He was new to the factory, only since the start of the year, still an apprentice, assigned simple tasks like drying components. On either side of the machine sat baskets, one side stacked high with parts already dried, the other nearly empty. Trong glanced at them, calculating that one more load would finish the job. Almost time to go home. The storm outside grew heavier, thunder cracking like cannon fire. Uncle Ta was tidying up his tools, ready to leave, when it split the night. Something slammed to the ground. He rushed toward Trong's station and found the boy sprawled on the floor. "Help!" Trong tried to cry out, but the word barely left his lips before he collapsed. Uncle Ta bent down to check. Trong seemed to have stopped breathing. That was how it happened. The ambulance rushed him to the hospital, but fate was merciless. The boy did not survive. When I arrived at the scene, the storm still raged, rain pounding, thunder splitting the sky. The crash sounded like thunder, must have been. Then I turned and saw him on the ground. He must have been struck by lightning, Uncle Ta told us. The dryer stood in a side room of the factory, not very large. At the time, Trong was alone there, while Uncle Ta was cleaning up in the main workshop. The accident site was not a sealed room, only partitioned by uneven sheets of alloy. Outside, the rain poured, sometimes spraying through gaps near the ceiling. Water had pooled across the floor, soaking shoes to the soles. Workers had laid wide wooden planks to avoid stepping directly into the water. The circuit breaker against electrical leakage was still switched on, mounted on the wall. An old, worn cable ran from it, tucked into a plastic conduit along the aluminum partition, feeding the dryer Trong had been operating before his death. The machine was silent now, its dark green shell heavy and brooding. A cylindrical body, half the height of a man, with a hatch on top for loading and unloading. The handle was a horizontal bar, and I noticed streaks of blood clinging to it. After confirming several times with the factory supervisor that the dryer's power had been cut, I forced open the heavy door. Inside lay a handful of mechanical parts, already dried, their names unknown to me. "When you came in, was the breaker on or off?" I pointed to the switch on the wall. "It was already like this when I got here. I even checked to make sure it was on," Uncle Ta replied. Suddenly, a flash of white light streaked across my vision, followed by a thunderclap so violent it made everyone flinch. Through the gaps in the ceiling, I saw rain pouring in, hammering against the aluminum sheets with a hollow lop-dop sound. When the thunder finally subsided, I turned back to Uncle Ta. "That's the sound you heard, wasn't it?" "Yeah, almost like that, though it sounded a bit louder than before." Uncle Ta hesitated, but still confirmed his first impression. I grew doubtful, recalling the corpse I had examined at the hospital. The victim had collapsed onto the wet floor, his clothes and canvas shoes soaked through. On the right hand, I saw a spindle-shaped wound cutting across the palm, long at both ends, wide in the middle. The edges were pale, the epidermis peeled back, but there was little bleeding. Beneath the lifted skin, patches of soft tissue showed blackened burns. The injury was shallow, damaging only the surface. No other wounds marked the body. Could the victim truly have died from a lightning strike? It was bizarre. The accident site was not a sealed room, only framed with aluminum sheets, so even indoors a strike was possible. Yet overall, the damage to the body was far too light. I once heard a story like this. In a small town in France, 3 soldiers stood beneath a tree, sheltering from a storm. When the rain stopped, strangely, they remained frozen in place. A local resident noticed them, at first paying little attention, but after a while the 3 men still hadn't moved, rigid as statues. Curious, the man approached to see what was wrong. What he witnessed was almost unbelievable. The moment he touched them, all 3 collapsed to the ground, crumbling into ash. Perhaps the tale is exaggerated, but it illustrates the devastating power of lightning. The voltage and current of a strike are immense. In an instant, the human body's temperature can rise higher than that of a crematory furnace. Death comes immediately, heart or nervous system paralyzed in a flash. And yet, Uncle Ta told us that after the thunderous crash, Trong still managed to cry out one word: "Help!" That single plea suggests he was not struck by lightning at all. Could Uncle Ta have lied? Or was there something deeper hidden? If he had lied, it would be nothing more than a joke, because the chance of a lightning strike was so low, no one would use it as a trick. In fact, the very absurdity of his words proves he wasn't lying. Most likely he heard the thunder at the same moment he saw Trong collapse, and his mind linked the 2 events together. But, judging from the body, the likelihood of a lightning strike was minimal. So why did the victim die? Perhaps it's time to return to the basics: the corpse and the crime scene. An experienced forensic examiner would recognize it at once. The wound on the right palm was a textbook case of electrocution, commonly referred to as an electrical burn in forensic science. Such burns appear where the current enters the body, round or oval in shape, ghostly white or gray-yellow, the center sunken, the edges raised like the rim of a crater. The base lies flat or cracked, sometimes clinging to fragments of ash or molten metal, often showing charred skin. Electrical burns can be as small as a pinhead or stretch several dozen centimeters or more. In suspected electrocution cases, the burn plays a crucial role. It reveals the shape of the contact point between conductor and flesh. For example, if the middle of the current stream makes contact, the burn appears as a continuous line. If the end of the stream touches, the burn is a small circle. And if the contact is with a plug, the burn appears in pairs. I recalled the wound on Trong's palm and surveyed the scene, beginning to reason. First, the location. The burn lay within the palm, a place rarely exposed, easily hidden when the hand is clenched. Lightning most often strikes the head, then other exposed parts of the body. The palm is an unlikely target. Considering this, the chance of a lightning strike was very low. Next, the shape. The wound stretched across the right palm, spindle-shaped, elongated, meaning the conductor that touched the victim was long in form. From this, the conclusion was clear. The cause of death was electrocution, but not by lightning. The point of contact was the palm, and the conductor had a long shape. When, then, would one need to use the palm? When grasping. Now it was time to return to the scene, to boldly put forth a theory. Why the victim had come into contact with electricity that led to his death. At the scene, the object that met all 3 conditions, long in shape, capable of conducting electricity, and something the victim would willingly grasp while alive, was the upper door handle of the dryer. On that handle, traces of blood remained, proof that the victim made contact with electricity while holding it. From this, we can draw a simple inference and reconstruct the moment of the incident. If one prefers a more professional term, it is called reconstructing the crime scene. In this reconstruction, the victim appears once more, reliving his final moments. He was drying a batch of mechanical parts with the old dryer, tucked away in a side room of the factory. The room was poorly sealed. In the stormy night, rain blew in, pooling across the floor. Workers had laid wooden planks to step on, but water was unavoidable. That night, the victim wore canvas shoes, already soaked through. The dryer was connected to the wall breaker by an aging cable. For the machine to run, the breaker had to remain on. When the batch finished, the victim moved to open the hatch, ready to retrieve the dried parts. But Trong never suspected the old wiring had leaked, turning the dryer into a massive conductor. He gripped the handle with his right hand as usual, preparing to open the door. The powerful current coursing through the machine found its path, surging through his body via that hand. At the same instant, the breaker, designed to protect against leakage, tripped from on to off. That was why, when Uncle Ta rushed to the scene, he found the breaker already shut. The moment the powerful current surged through him, the victim's body went rigid, collapsing to the floor. Yet, he remained conscious long enough to summon every ounce of strength for a cry for help, before slipping into unconsciousness. Following this line of reasoning, the tragedy was an accident, old wiring, careless handling. But one question remained unanswered. The loud sound heard just before death. Was it truly the thunder Uncle Ta described? Everyone wondered. The coincidence seemed uncanny, like something out of a ghost story. Thunder strikes, and a life is lost. This question puzzled us for some time, until someone, by chance, opened the dryer hatch without a firm grip. The door fell with a heavy bang, and the mystery was revealed. The cause lay in the victim's final sequence of movements. Trong had lifted the handle, raising the door halfway, when the shock struck. His hand released, and the door slammed shut. The hatch was solid metal, heavy enough that when it dropped, it crashed against the frame with a thunderous sound. From the start, Uncle Ta had not been certain. In such confusion, he could only mistake it for thunder. Hearing that crash, he realized with a start, it was not the sky, but the falling door. At the very moment the hatch slammed down, Trong's shadow at the scene seemed to fade away. He departed in peace, knowing someone would recount his final story. And so, the case of the unusual death was resolved perfectly through reconstruction. Though it was only an accident, the marks on the body and the evidence at the scene allowed the entire chain of events to be pieced together. Reconstructing a crime scene is not some extraordinary feat reserved for the movies. Nearly every case, from theft to robbery and murder, can be pieced together from the traces left behind. In this accident, only a fraction of the techniques of reconstruction were applied, analyzing the cause of death, deducing the object that inflicted injury, and determining the manner of death, all through a combination of forensic science and scene investigation. In major criminal cases, reconstruction goes further, identifying the type of scene, estimating the number of perpetrators, analyzing the sequence of events, uncovering motives, and sketching out suspects. The work is not always easy, but it is undeniably fascinating. I had a colleague who always wore two masks during autopsies, one standard medical mask and another specialized 3M respirator. I once asked him why. Didn't the 3M make breathing harder? He told me of a time he had examined a heavily decomposed body in a sealed environment, and afterward developed aspiration pneumonia, later even discovering a tumor in his lungs. He wasn't certain if the illness came from bad habits or from forgetting to wear proper protection during the autopsy, but the thought alone terrified him. From then on, he wore 2 layers of masks, and when faced with a decomposed corpse, he put on a gas mask to reduce inhalation of toxic fumes. Hearing his story, I suddenly felt my own lungs tighten. But in truth, 2 masks are useless against the stench of death, pungent, pervasive, seeping everywhere. The odor of a corpse is toxic gas released from the mouth and anus in the early stages of decomposition, primarily hydrogen sulfide, H2S, and ammonia, NH3, produced by bacteria breaking down the intestines. If you happen to own a textbook on forensic toxicology, you will easily find these 2 deadly gases listed among the most important. At the very beginning of the chapter on hydrogen sulfide, it is noted, "When a corpse decomposes, it produces a large amount of H2S gas." Later comes the warning. Fatalities from H2S rank among the top 3 cases of chemical poisoning. This is alarming because every body releases H2S, more or less depending on the stage of decay. In a sealed space, Exposure to concentrations of 75 to 150 milligrams per cubic meter for 60 to 120 minutes causes eye irritation and breathing difficulty. At 1,000 milligrams per cubic meter, acute poisoning and death can occur. Forensic examiners and investigators often work at such scenes, even with decomposed remains. In those moments, the greatest concern is not the corpse or the crime scene itself, but protecting one's own life. Let me share a true story. A colleague of mine once investigated an unusual death. The body had decomposed badly in a small, sealed cellar with no ventilation, the stench overwhelming. The first police officer to arrive said that the moment he reached the door, the foul odor hit him so hard he turned and fled, unable to face what lay inside. But eventually someone had to enter, and that task fell to the forensic team. The danger at that scene was not a visible killer, but an invisible enemy, the most terrifying kind. My colleague had taken every precaution, yet the toxic gases inside were so concentrated that within minutes he grew dizzy. His throat burned, his eyes watered uncontrollably. He staggered out, vomiting violently, then collapsed unconscious on the way to the hospital. Fortunately, he was saved in time, but the incident shook us all. It was a stark reminder. Before you understand the enemy, never act recklessly. And such risks are not limited to decomposition. Electrical crime scenes can be just as deadly. I myself investigated the lightning case. We knew that examining a site involving electricity demanded extreme caution, so we checked repeatedly to ensure all power sources were cut. Even then, accidents remained possible. Some people, distracted or careless, ignored our warnings. One colleague nearly lost his life at such a scene. It was a case of stolen power lines near a steel bridge, with a transformer cabinet close by. The stolen cable ran along the bridge, so to investigate, he had to stand on it. He asked again and again if the power was off, waited for confirmation, then stepped forward. In an instant, disaster struck. The cable snapped back, a section fell onto the bridge, sparking violently. He froze, paralyzed with fear, unable to move. Just moments earlier, he had planned to examine the cut in the wire barehanded. Had he touched it, the outcome would have been unthinkable. At that moment, death was only a single step away. Danger comes not only from the crime scene, but also from people themselves. Forensic work involves both examining the scene and assessing injuries. You've surely heard of hospital disturbances, sometimes not just disorder, but outright attacks on doctors during their shifts. We in forensics face similar threats. Once, I conducted a small survey, asking colleagues in different positions about the closest brush with death in their careers. Among them was a university friend who had worked as a forensic examiner since graduation. He told me of the time he was chased with a knife. His injury assessment had gone against a suspect, and the man waited outside the office armed with a blade. That evening, as my friend left with coworkers, the suspect suddenly lunged, swinging the knife. Luckily, my friend reacted quickly, turning to run. The attacker pursued him. "I'll kill you!" His colleagues rushed in, tackling the assailant before tragedy struck. My colleague's story reminded me of the judge who was murdered right at the courthouse steps. I never imagined forensic work could be just as dangerous. But thinking it over, it makes sense. When you stand for the light, the darkness will strike back. Perhaps some readers will think I ramble, but these are real stories from the people around me. I once believed forensic work carried little risk, yet reality proved otherwise. I still recall my superior's words during an inspection. "I don't care how much you accomplish. I only want to know whether your safety measures keep pace with your work. The risks in forensics are unlike those faced by others. Remember, safety comes first. Only when you are safe can you fulfill your duty." Those words were not empty. They revealed a genuine respect for human life.